Iteration is extremely common in gaming. Proven mechanics are constantly recycled and repackaged into something that's on the surface brand new, but invariably has roots that can be traced back to the concepts that inspired it. Ori and the Blind Forest iterated on ideas seen in Super Meat Boy, which iterated on ideas seen in N+, which iterated, or in this particular example innovated, on ideas seen in... you get the picture. Today, we'll take a look at a game that continues the tradition of iteration in the medium, offering players a familiar-feeling platforming experience, but dressed with a new coat of paint. Through broken glasses, we look at Splasher. Splash Team's debut title puts you in the role of the titular hero, the Splasher. Armed with a splatter cannon, you'll storm the in-court paint factory in order to save your comrades from the clutches of Le Docteur and put an end to his malevolent schemes. That's about it. Splasher is a platformer, that much is obvious. Its differentiating factor, however, is the splatter cannon, which, by game's end, will have been upgraded to dispense water, as well as 2 different types of paint, which I'll discuss shortly. The Splasher himself handles quite differently than I anticipated going in. I was a bit taken aback at how floaty his handling was, and it resulted in a few early deaths while I grew accustomed to it. Running and jumping in this game feels as if you're on the moon, though this isn't a negative as the game is built around it. Splasher is not without speed, but it will come from the player's ability to build momentum, making creative use of the various paints available to them as they progress through a level. Overall, though, Splasher is a slower, more methodical platforming experience than something like Super Meat Boy. The demo I played featured 4 select stages plucked from the game's 22 that will be available in the final release, so chosen to give a reasonable impression of the game's difficulty curve. In my time playing through it, I never really felt pressured to make a super split-second jump. I usually had ample time to pause, think, and then execute. The game isn't necessarily about speed for speed's sake, so much as it is about navigation and how quickly you can find your way. Levels can be fairly lengthy, taking anywhere between 5 to 15 minutes depending on your prowess. A single level is like a series of mini gauntlets that all aim to challenge your capabilities with the splatter cannon in various ways. So let's talk about it. At the beginning of the game, the cannon can only fire water, which is useful for taking out small drones or activating switches. The interesting thing about the splatter cannon in general is that when you're in range, it'll automatically target the nearest enemy or switch, which is handy for speedruns. You can also aim the cannon manually with the left stick, but as this is also how you move, it can be a bit wonky when you're trying to aim for something specific in the midst of your running. I fairly often found myself wishing for the ability to aim the cannon independent of my moving the character, perhaps by way of holding one of the shoulder buttons, as they otherwise had no action tied to them in the demo. It would have been useful for the more precise shots I had to make in order to rescue some of the other splashers or nab collectibles. Pretty early on, you earn an upgrade to the cannon in the form of a red goop called stick ink. Coating walls or ceilings with the stuff will make them scalable, and I was pleased to see I could simultaneously move and hold down the button to do so, a nuanced bit of mechanics obviously implemented for the speedrunners. Stick ink also has combative capabilities, stopping some of the larger enemies in their tracks in a way that water couldn't. The final upgrade, obtained later in the game, is a yellow substance called bounce ink. This was by far the most enjoyable paint to use, as it possesses the greatest degree of impact on gameplay. As the name implies, bounce ink immediately sends you into the air, your distance and trajectory influenced by where you made contact. Furthermore, firing the stuff at enemies will send them careening in the opposite direction, which creates some fairly satisfying moments. The game, as expected, really shines when all of these abilities are available to the player. Romain Claude, former level designer for Ubisoft, is now designer and coder for Splash Team. His experience working on games such as Rayman Origins and Legends is reflected in Splasher in the form of stages that possess a multitude of traps and encounters, seamlessly flowing from one to the other that, when learned, can be traversed with precision in the game's Time Attack mode. Time Attack is unlocked on a per-level basis, tasking the player with the rescue of all 7 splashers in a stage before it becomes available for that stage. Your comrades are scattered throughout the levels, typically behind some sort of obstacle or inside one of the game's Meat Boy-esque quarantine zones. These mini-zones consist of single-room encounters that will test your ability, and upon successful completion, a splasher is freed from his holdings. Taking a page from Rayman, the last of the splashers is only freed at the end of the level, and only if you've collected enough of what I've taken to calling droplets. Time Attack is exactly as it sounds. You'll progress through an exact replica of the stage, sans any kind of collectibles, and your finished time is measured against a predetermined value, rewarding you either a bronze, silver, or gold medal upon completion. There's also a dedicated speedrun mode, which was not available in the demo, but will consist of a few different varieties of play. There's the selfish speedrun, which will be the full game timed with no transition between levels. Time passes regardless of what happens, including when you die, and there are no collectibles, quarantine zones, or splashers. Then there's the standard speedrun mode, which times your completion of the game with collectibles and splashers included in this mode. Finally, there's the Gotta Catch 'em All speedrun mode, which will time the full game, but you must rescue all of the splashers in a stage before you can move on to the next. I must say I like the game. The platforming is solid, but the clunkiness generated by your inability to aim the cannon independent of moving your character created some unnecessary difficulty at times. But this wasn't enough to intrude on my enjoyment of the game overall. The art style is simple and vibrant and does a fine job of visually communicating the too cool for school attitude that Splash Team seems to be going for. This attitude is accented wonderfully by the game's soundtrack, composed by Emmerich Schwartz, whose portfolio includes games like Rayman Origins, Valiant Hearts, and the upcoming Devolver Digital published Absolver. My biggest concern for Splasher is content. 22 levels doesn't sound like a lot, especially when you compare it to the breadth of content available in other platformers. Personally, I managed to finish the 4 stages in the demo in about an hour and a half, so I'd venture a guess that simply getting to the end of the final game will take roughly 8 to 11 hours, not including the time that's spent full clearing every stage and competing in the game's other modes. That all said, what is on offer here is compelling and certainly worth a look by anyone that enjoys the genre. You can pre-order the game right now on PC at a 25% discount before it launches on February 7th. It will also be available on the Xbox One and PS4, as well as Mac and Linux systems.